Tabletop RPGs. We're back. Yesterday, I tried to convince you, the viewer, that you should play tabletop RPGs. And today, here I am. I would like to try to help you. I want to tell you how to pick one. Because, look at this. I just pulled a small amount off of my shelf, and you could pick any one of these games and have many, many nights of fun and many cool stories and memories with your friends and family. So how can you, somebody who's just trying to get into this, figure out which one of these you want to play? I don't know. So how do you pick a game? This is like take 3. The first time my SD card filled up and I didn't know and talked for 20 minutes. The second time my microphone was off and I talked for 20 minutes. So let's get it right this time, huh? So the first thing you need to do in order to figure out how to find a game, which game you're going to go for, is decide, do you want to try to get a physical copy of a game that you can hold in your hands and read, or are you cool with a digital game, a PDF of some sort that you can either read on your computer or on your phone or on a tablet or print it out yourself at home? And there's no wrong answer there. I clearly prefer the physical. I like to hold a book in my hands and read it. I find I focus way better that way because I can't play a video game on a book. I can't shitpost in a book. It's just, there's only the one thing I can do in there, and then I do it, and that's nice, and I like it. But of course, there's 1,000 different factors. There's shelf space. There's, every time you move, you gotta lug all these damn books and boxes. There's, it's harder to share. If you're playing digitally if you're playing online with friends elsewhere in the world, the physical book is harder to share, and you're gonna have to dictate or scan. Whereas the digital book, it's like, hey, here's the PDF, eat it up. So, there's no wrong answers here. So there's no wrong answers there, and there are honestly a ton of great games that don't currently have a physical version. A lot of my games, for example, and I'm not alone in this, are digital only, and then you can print it out or whatever. I try to make them printer friendly, because then I can hold it. But where do you get those digital games, you might ask? And that's I think where we'll start, is a lot of digital games. There are 2 main websites. There's DriveThruRPG, which I'm not going to get into because it feels like the 90s in there, in not a good way. It's fine. And then a lot of indie RPGs, like more stuff that's my speed, is on itch.io. That is a website that was initially intended for just video games, but tabletop developers have kind of taken over a little corner of it, and now we make them. If you want to get to that little corner, just go to tabletop-roleplaying.games. That'll take you to the top physical itch.io games chart. And once you're there, honestly, if you pick the one with the coolest picture and the nicest name that tickles your brain in a particular way, you'll probably have a really nice time. And then don't watch the rest of this video. Simple. You've just grabbed the coolest looking one on the page, and you're gonna enjoy it. But and then on the contrary, if you want to get a physical book, your local game store, if you've got one that's welcoming and stocked. If you happen to be in Pittsburgh, I can recommend Games Unlimited in Squirrel Hill or Phantom of the Attic in Oakland. Both have very nice RPG collections. Hopefully I'll get my games there at some point whenever I muster the courage to speak to people. Otherwise, you can go to an online retailer like floatingchair.club. A lot of great stuff there. Exalted Funeral. Just Google those words and you'll end up on the websites that I'm talking about. Or if you're in somewhere that's not the U.S., I'm sure that there are other retailers closer to you in the world, so you don't have to pay $1 billion in shipping. Especially these days, you know what I mean? So logistics of procuring a game aside, how do you pick one? There are so many words and thoughts and jargon and whatever in the marketing drivel that we as designers put forth to you, so that we can differentiate our game and you can know what it means and what it's like at a glance. But if you're way new and you don't know any of the jargon or the words or whatever, It might be intimidating, it might be confusing, it might be weird. And that makes sense, because if you think about it, let's say you are recommended this cool new mathcore band, and you're like, what is mathcore? Is that a music genre? And then you just Google it, and you're reading on Wikipedia what mathcore means, and then you get it. Whereas if somebody tells you, hey, I've got a great GM-less myth-making game, world-building game, whatever, you're like, those are words that you're saying, but I don't get it. And there's no, it's too niche. It's not on Wikipedia. A GM-less game is not a Wikipedia entry. It might be, actually. I don't know. It's not something that's easily accessible. I have in the past tried to make a reservoir of information, which I'll link below, the tabletop glossary, if you did want to know what all these words meant and just read my definitions of them. You're welcome to go there, but I'm going to try to tell you right now, you don't need to know any of that. You don't need to know. Because the other half of the pitch of a tabletop RPG's marketing page should hopefully be thematic and feeling and thoughts and like what it's going to be like to play it, or what we hope it'll be like. So yeah, the most important thing, and I will probably go into more detail with actual recommendations. That might be what you're here looking for, but that's not today because So I might in a future video go into more detail with some actual recommendations, like my top 5 games of this, top 5 games of that, but that's not what this one is. This video is just me trying to tell you that the most important thing when you're trying to find a game is to pick one that sounds cool. That might sound pithy and like useless advice, but it's honestly the best way to do this. There are a few terminology bits that I can like offer you here that might help with this, but again, yeah, just go for something that sounds cool. So those few considerations are like, does the game have a GM? So the GM, if you recall from the last video, is just like the person in a traditional role-playing game that is in charge of curating the world and playing as non-player characters and dictating like events that happen in the background and stuff like that. They're kind of like the computer. If you're playing a video game, the computer is your GM. If you're playing a tabletop role-playing game, your GM is your GM, and they're guiding you through the experience. So if you want a game, if that sounds great, if that sounds like the you want to play a game with that, that's something to look out for when you're looking at games. But the flip side of that are games that are GM-less or GM-agnostic or whatever 1,000 other words there are for it, which is to say that all players are on equal footing. You'll probably have one player that has read the rulebook and is facilitating, but there's nobody that's like, oh, you're running through this dungeon, I'm in charge of the dungeon. Like, I tell you what's in it. We're going through this dungeon, what's in here? What are we looking at? So these are two way different styles of play. Both are wonderful. I recommend both, but I'm sure one of those sounds maybe more up your alley. That's like the big thing to look out for. So maybe decide if you want GM-less or GM-full, and then dive in. Try to find a game that matches something you want. Do you want to play Regency-era politics? Do you want a horror game? Do you want a dungeon crawler? Because that's the classic. Do you want a game about language and how it dies? Do you want to go on a quest? Do you want to blah, 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 blah? There's so many games, and maybe in future videos I can finally allow myself to recommend them and spend some time talking about specific games. But until then, I hope this has been helpful, because my god, it took me a while to actually successfully record it. If you did want specific recommendations for a style of game, at me on Twitter, AdamyBell over there. Just say, hey, I watched your video and I want to know a game that I can play in space. Whatever you're looking for, maybe I can try to help. A little engagement, you see. Thanks for watching. I will be back with more. I also recorded, as a little teaser, I recorded a version of this where I tried to walk through all the different types of games, and it made me lose my mind a little bit. I'll release that later as a little bonus. But I didn't want it to be the follow-up to yesterday's hopefully actually helpful video. I instead made this hopefully actually helpful video. Tune in next time. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye. Okay.